Don't worry, you teased it. It's fine. Yeah. You teased it.
Switch the order.
We're going to start with Tony Martin, who is serving a suspension at the moment, and his sister holds his licence, and they won the Northumberland Vars yesterday. Holly Doyle rode the winner, and there was significant fanfare and all smiles. But there was a sense that his presence and the fact that this was really barely concealed, Maddie, was simply cocking a snook at the whole process. It's more than not a great look.
It's embarrassing, if we're honest.
Well, it's a pointless punishment, isn't it?
It is. It's embarrassing. I think the way it looks is just dreadful. You know, what is the point, in theory, of suspending someone when they're
not really suspended?
They're not really suspended. And when they're credited for giving riding instructions, when they're brought into all the winning photographs, when they're hailed by owners. Yeah, I think it's a terrible, terrible look for the sport. And although it's a tricky thing to police, clearly, we can and should do better. I thought the whole thing was just a farce, to be honest.
The thing is, if you were suspended, Harry, God forbid, and your wife took over the licence, or somebody else in the yard took over the licence, or your dad took the licence back, or whatever, would you then turn up to the races and admit to giving the instructions and so on and so forth?
No, I think that's one of the things we haven't seen in the past. I think there's lots of times it's happened, and people generally, they may be doing stuff in the background, but which they shouldn't be, but I'm sure they are, generally stay out of the public eye. This seemed quite brazen to me, and I mean, I don't know, would the BHA have known he was going to be there? Probably not. ITV, you know, have they got any say in saying that he shouldn't be there? But it just doesn't look great.
He shouldn't have the option, though, should he, really? Because
you told me earlier, he wasn't banned from going to races.
Well, if you're suspended, you're not necessarily disqualified.
Yeah.
No.
But here's the interesting thing, and I wonder, people will say, well, hang on, why in this sport, when someone's banned, are they not banned? Well, because obviously you've got to think of the livelihoods of the people you're employing, and you've got to think of the welfare of the horses that are in your stable. But it then begs the question, unless it's egregious and you want to take somebody out of the game and disqualify them completely, what is the point of a suspension? Is there a better way of meting out the punishment? You just give them a massive fine? I don't know. It doesn't feel
like it's going to put someone else off doing what he did.
I mean, if you leave a grey area as well, you know, inevitably someone's going to fill that area. So it maybe just need to look at like tightening up the actual suspension, the rules of the suspension. It was an unnecessary point that he was probably making yesterday, and slightly damaging to everyone else.
All right, let's talk about Radio 4, who this week have dropped their daily tradition of giving racing tips. They've committed to doing some tips at the bigger festivals and still covering racing, though its coverage was fairly limited to this point. This coincides with the retirement of Gary Richardson, who's done the sports reporting on Radio 4 for a long time. Is this a sign that racing is further losing its position close to the national consciousness, or is it a case of, well, they weren't taking it very seriously anyway, and it was all a bit of a joke, so we don't really need them? What do you think?
I'd be leaning towards the latter more. I'm not a Radio 4 listener. It's not something I was particularly aware of, and I can understand how, you know, it gives racing prominence, but how relevant, and, you know, are you telling me that people were really listening to that show, hearing a fun tip and going, do you know what, I'd really love to go racing, I'm going to book my ticket to go? You know, we have so many other avenues that are selling our sport. I don't think this is necessarily the end of the world. I
accept that point. I think my issue with it was more that somebody actually sat there and took a decision to get rid of something and said, right, well, horse racing, that's a bit of an irrelevance. Betting, oh, God, betting, no, thank you, at the moment, gone.
Yeah, well, you'd be a Radio 4 man, wouldn't you?
No.
No?
No.
I think it's just, I think from the point of view, it's just another bite of the apple, isn't it? It's just another sort of step in the wrong direction. I get Maddie's point entirely, and I agree with it, but it's just about keeping racing slightly on you know, in the you know, in everyone's head, even if it's subconsciously, and obviously has such a huge reach, and it was a tiny piece of tradition that racing sort of is trying to cling on to left, right, and centre, and in that format, it's a little bit of a disappointment, but I don't think it's it's not hugely detrimental.
Probably ties in a bit with the national press. That just, you know, you can turn through the sports pages, and if the Times has got half a page doing lucky, you're doing well. So, yeah, I think that's probably more of a concern.
OK, let's talk about something that is a very grave concern, and that is multiple deaths on one card. And it took place this week at Newton Abbot. Very hot day, up to about 29, 30 degrees, at a track that races quite extensively through the summer, but started a little bit later this time because of the waterlogging during the course of the spring. And there were 4 different injuries or occurrences that led to fatalities. And the BHA pledged to look into this. This is not the first time we've seen this, Harry, particularly on a summer jumps card. I certainly remember being at Wincanton where there were 5 one day, Wetherby where there were 5. We've had instances at Sutherland, Sedgefield that have been looked at closely. Is it time for jumping in the meat of the summer in very hot weather to go?
It's getting to that point. You know, jumping's under a lot of scrutiny as it is, and what jump, you know, whenever you talk to a jumps trainer and you say, oh, the ground, you know, it's good to soft, that what jump horses need versus what flat horses need is so different. They really do want it like proper soft, you know, like what flat horses would probably call heavy, and because they can't take their races that well. They're not, you know, they're often older and they have more of a roundy action, and to go onto rapid, quick ground at Newton Abbot, you're kind of asking for trouble. And I don't know if I think they do a bit more, but I think now we're doing trot-ups for every horses at Ascot and Lockingstay and whatever. They should probably do that for all summer jumps meetings, but anything that has any weakness just shouldn't be allowed to run.
My gut feeling, George, is that quite low-grade horses plus quick ground plus, for this country, quite extreme heat, is asking for trouble.
With an unusually wet winter as well, you know, then with the ground drying out so quickly, it's probably falsified the ground. Look, jump racing is very proud of the measures they go to protect the horses, and they do a wonderful job. And I'm sure that they'll be looking into this very closely and seeing if there's anything at all that they can do, because obviously this is a situation that must be avoided at all costs. Whether that is taking off, you know, if it's 25 degrees or whatever, you'd lose a handful of meetings. You know, it's a small price to pay to protect the wonderful sport.
I'm very conscious of the fact there'll be racecourses out there, Newton Abbot, who do a great job of getting these fixtures through the summer. They're very popular, very well attended. I'm sure it all makes sense from a balance sheet point of view. Worcester, Stratford, courses that race at this time of year. Uttoxeter tend to race all around the year, Maddie. And the executives will be saying, please, this is in our entire business model depends on this. But the sport's got to see the bigger picture, hasn't it?
It has, but I don't necessarily mean that, you know, think that should mean we should axe the whole summer jumping thing. I think, you know, as the BHA have done, vow to investigate it. Newton Abbot are going to assist with that, obviously. And let's just think about what more we can do. I don't think it's time to you know, be saying, right, this has happened, let's overreact, and let's bin it all. Maybe it'll reach that way one day, but we just have to do our due diligence and do as much as we can at this point.
You were nodding when Harry was talking about sort of enhanced checks. Should that apply across the board, or do we simply not finance well enough to do it?
Well, if we can, why not? You know, if we are fully committing to, you know, protecting these horses as much as we can, then we should if we can.
George?
It's such
see you wincing slightly.
It's such a difficult one because, you know, we all know as trainers, like we're obviously doing our best to, you know, protect the horses, but ultimately a horse, the way it trots up is original to the individual horse, and the moment you start bringing people in trotting every horse up, you're going to see horses that are well capable of racing, people have paid huge amounts of money to race. The trainers, the vets in the yard know that they're sound in a good condition, and you start trotting every single one of those up with an individual vet. You know, it becomes very, very choppy waters. Admittedly, at those big meetings, Royal Ascots, places like that, you can have fantastic on-course vets. You know, you're very well prepared at home to, you know, with the report and things like that. But, you know, it just becomes very choppy waters.
Can I just ask you guys at Royal Ascot, did your horses all come back quite well from Royal Ascot, or did you have a few a bit stiff and sore?
They're all good. exactly.
All good?
Mine came back great, and you know, obviously I'm all for racing on that sort of summer fast ground, and I don't know what Harry thinks, that you have very few problems coming back on beautiful summer fast ground on a nice clean track like that.
But it's safe and consistent, that's
Yeah.
the point, fresh.
Yeah.
And there hadn't been a whole load of watering leading up to the meeting because there'd been a lot of natural irrigation. To what extent does that help? So actually, you're just putting a little sprinkle on.
I mean, they actually put quite a lot on, I think.
They put like 5 and 4 each day, but that's in those temperatures, that's nothing. That goes in no time.
Yeah.
But there hadn't been, because there'd been so much natural, there'd not been a bucket load of watering leading up to the meeting.
And they probably had, but we've had a lot of like good grass growth this year because of the mild, wet kind of spring. Therefore, a lot of the courses are actually in better condition than they are in other years.
Okay. Now you've got your chance to open up about the Irish Derby. There's loads you can go at here. So just by way of introduction, Coolmore said this week that they were bolstering the numbers in the Irish Derby to make sure that it satisfied the Whirlpool criteria. I spoke to the chief executive of the Tote, Alex Frost, and he was telling me that it's 2/3 as much again to your Whirlpool pot back to the Curragh if you have 7 runners, not 8, 7, because of the potential for exotic wagering in Hong Kong and elsewhere. It's a pretty parlous state for the race to be in when it's having to be propped up to 7.
Well, I mean, Aidan will often run quite a few in it anyway, so I don't think he will have gone out of his way to say, oh, this year we better do it because of Whirlpool, because quite often, you know...
But they've done it before, haven't they?
He quite often is filling half these fields.
Yeah.
It's a little bit depressing when you look at it, thinking, are there no other Irish horses that could run in this?
So the Patrick Cooper argument is that that the Ballydoyle hegemony in this race is, you know, as much a part of the problem as a solution to the problem, and that problem would be solved if you reduce the distance of the race to 10 furlongs, and that has gathered a bit of traction in Ireland. Is there anything in that?
Well, I mean, I guess also another issue is the timing of the Irish Derby. You know, having had the English Derby and Royal Ascot just before it, it's sort of slightly, you know, not an afterthought at all. But it falls behind.
Well, the growth of Royal Ascot in standing, I think, for horse people is definitely something.
Exactly. I mean, I don't want to sort of get sort of too authoritative on the changing the distance of the race, but if the race is not filling and it's not fulfilling its purpose. And also, you have to understand that the commercial aspect of standing a stallion has changed, whether we like it or not. You know, it might be that it's something they need to look at. You know, to make the race more appealing commercially moving forward. Times are changing. We don't want to take the tradition out of the sport everywhere we can, but we need to adapt.
Okay, Maddie, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with anything that's been said, really. I mean, in an ideal world, we wouldn't. But in an ideal world, we wouldn't be in this situation. So we do have to adapt to an extent. I think, really, it's incredibly sad, the demise of the Irish Derby, really, compared to what it was, say, even before I was born, for instance, and the identity it's had and the place it holds. So, yeah, I think it's about time something was done to rejuvenate the event.
Would you consider bringing it back in distance?
You have to consider it. I mean, that should be being considered now. Whether we actually do it or not is another query. But the landscape that Irish flat racing is in, it's interesting at the minute, isn't it? Because us Brits are dominating a lot of those races over there. I mean, we saw it with the 1-2 in the Pretty Polly.
That's fighting talk.
I think that's
going to come and bite you on the bum very, very quickly. You were slightly grimacing.
Well, I just think, actually, if you've got the Eclipse next weekend...
then the European Pan Committee wouldn't let it happen, would they?
You've got the Eclipse next weekend, you've got the French Derby's 10.
You guys sit on all these...
And all the Ascot, you know, there's plenty of Ascot 10s and 12s. I just think there isn't the horse population to fill all these races. So it's just the way they're sort of positioned. But what is... I mean, I think it's worth... Is it worth 700
to the winner?
Euros to the winner? You know, we're all running around in the Hampton Court and stuff for 75.
Exactly.
You know, that is a race, but a bit like Cheltenham, Ascot holds this.
This is what I was saying. It's become much more of a thing, isn't it?
You want to have a winner at Ascot because that's what everyone's watching.
And also, how much of it is down to Aidan O'Brien and the standing and the landscape of racing in Ireland? You know, if he's got a strong stock that year, it can make the picture look very, very different.
But just asking you guys, I mean, from your business point of view, would you rather have the winner of the Hampton Court or finish second in the Irish Derby?
Oh, win. I mean, it's just win or nothing, isn't it? So win, certainly. I thought you were going to say, "I'll win the Irish Derby" for a second.
Yeah, I'll take the Derby.
But it's but Asker's starting to develop that kind of that slight sense of false equivalence that Cheltenham has, where
I hate that because me the creeps a little bit.
People would rather win a tiddlywinks contest at Ascot than they would win the Eclipse or win the Hampton Court or whatever. I just hope it doesn't become a victim of its own success in that respect.
No, I don't see why it should at all. You know, it's a completely separate make-up to the jump racing, you know, where Cheltenham has become so all-encompassing. But, you know, the Royal Ascot is...
You and I were doing a Royal Ascot preview night this year, so...
We were. When John Cosden very much ran that gig, didn't he? He was great. He was in great form. He didn't... The only good piece of information he gave us was that... Inspira was running over 10, and so everyone backed her, and then sadly it didn't quite happen.
You're not suggesting use of inside information, are you? We're going to get into another political scandal here.
I don't think anyone's that interested in.
Anyway, yes, it didn't quite work out. But anyway, you get the point. We're going to talk about the Racing League. Are you a Racing League man?
Yeah, we've had a few winners in the Racing League.
Racing League?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah? So they're in the parent company of the Racing League is further into debt this week and is coming up with some interesting solutions whereby they can sort of finance their company. But I suppose the question is this not now simply an extension of ARC's existing fixture list, Harry? Has it not just simply been subsumed into...
I don't actually know the full details, but you kind of hear people say it feels like the Racing League have kind of handed over the fixtures to ARC, and what ARC have achieved is getting 6 extra fixtures on ITV on an evening meeting on a Thursday, I think it is.
Clever chap, that Martin Cruddas, isn't it?
Yeah, they have just it's worked out for them. Racing League started as meant to be sort of teams and sponsored, and in the first year Jeremy did great. There were lots of I think Odds Bible sponsored a team, and there was a lot.
Great.
Well, I don't know, but it was taking racing to it was meant to take racing to a new audience.
It was meant to,
but it didn't.
Yeah.
And now it feels like maybe ARC have just grabbed some nice fixtures.
And I suppose that you both kind of raised an interesting point here, which is that it started off trying to do something different and innovative, and was talking about broadcast innovation and lots of money being spent. And
we should always praise that.
Yeah, I think Jeremy raised ambitions were here.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of landed here and has just been kind of subsumed into the general morass of summer racing. But to what end now? That's the point.
But actually, if ARC are committed to
the money,
funding it how it was originally started to be funded, where the best race on the night's worth 50 to the winner and the rest are worth 25, and I think 12.5. That is better than what we're normally racing for. So no trainers or owners are going to complain. I know the colours is a bit of a put-off, but if you win a 50 grander with a 0 to 85 horse, you're not complaining. This
is the thing, though. Those two gents, with all respect, if I was in their shoes, I'd be thinking the exact same. You know, increased prize money, the racing's good, etc., etc. Yeah, I praise people for having a go at trying to do something different and innovate, because it's not an easy place to do that in. But my issue, I guess, is with just the concept of it. And in terms of that raison d'etre of setting out to attract a new audience, I just don't think it works, Nick.
It's become an in-house vehicle, hasn't it? It's become great for you guys, and it's become probably pretty good for ARC, so that's some virtue.
Yeah, there's lots of positives there, but in terms of what it set out to do, or perhaps what it's still trying to do, I don't know. I'm not sure it feels that correct.
I think it's probably actually just turned off the customer because it's so confusing and you don't really know, no one's really getting behind the teams, are they?
No, not like they did in the first year or so, and which was great fun and well supported.
Yeah.
Like everything, the bar slightly moved and things slightly slipped.
And in fairness, some of the team captains give it plenty of welly, because there's no point being involved in it if you don't lean into it. Kevin Blake, Matt Chapman, these guys, Jamie Osborne, they've absolutely leaned into it and given it everything. But unless you've got a bit of financial heft behind you, then you kind of feel like you're in a bit of a sort of low budget. It's a knockout waving a little flag.
I just don't know how much people resonate with the team thing in horse racing. I think that's the bottom line for me.
No, they did initially. That's the first year was fantastic, and we really got behind it. But then it just became a watered-down model of the year before. So it's just become really now. It's a really good prize money for that grade of horse.
And you're like, good, we'll take a bit of
They
that.
were
Of course they will.
The team captains get paid for winning, I'm pretty sure.
Do they?
Yes. Yeah, it meant quite a lot to Jamie Osborne. We won it the first year, and we were one short of winning it last year. And I know it meant a lot to Jamie, and therefore I assume there was some cash involved. And it enabled trainers to buy into the concept because there is the winning team get given, I think it's 50 grand to be split between the trainers. So if you had 10 runners of the whatever it was, 35, you might have been getting 15 grand or whatever it was, and then we gave that all to the staff. So they bought into it because we were able to give bonuses out for winning it. So there's something to it. Someone tried to achieve something and it hasn't quite panned out, but there were some things in there that made sense.
Let's talk about reserves. There's talk at the moment about whether or not to bring back reserves in the Grand National, and you'll remember that you've got to have the horse taken out before noon the previous day. So you've got to have the horse taken out pre-noon Friday, I think it is, in order to get a reserve in for the Saturday. Similar principles apply to some of the big handicaps at Royal Ascot. But at what point, and I know you want to talk about this, at what point does it actually become pointless?
Well, I just think, I assume they set that deadline of 12 o'clock the previous day for the cards to be sent around the world and Whirlpool. But you had this year where the Golden Gates, no one came out before 12 the previous day, but then 4 came out on the day. You're then running in a 12-runner race where there were 3 other horses owners that would have been very willing to send their horse to the races the morning of the race, but they're not able to because it's published and the cards go around the world and Whirlpool, etc. I'm sure. I just don't see the point of having the reserves, because who is going to come out 12 o'clock before racing's happened on the day before? Because it's not like, oh, I've seen the ground and it's too quick or it's too soft. I declared yesterday and I'm just going to take it out.
It was used by the Hayes, wasn't it? They took one out and slid one in at the bottom, but unless you own that one and that one, it didn't really work for you.
Yeah, that was quite an individual circumstance, wasn't it? I mean, we all want, especially on those big days, the chance to run as many horses in the races as possible. I agree with Harry, the cut-off point is it doesn't make a huge amount of sense. I don't know the technicalities of being able to put a horse into a card and things like that once they're published, but it does probably needs to be adjusted, really.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with the cards, because you're printing the cards anyway in, say, the Racing Post and the PAs, but printing the cards with, it's not going to change, reserve number 31 or whatever.
Yeah,
so that's not an issue.
I wonder that myself. I wonder how much of it is Whirlpool. I was doing Whirlpool previews for Royal Ascot this year, and they're filmed 48 hours in advance. Obviously, we get the 48-hour decks, but a lot of the time we weren't basing things off draw and things like that. I wonder how much of it is demand from Hong Kong.
The betting industry as a whole doesn't really like the reserve system, I don't think.
No, but you'd have to think that a happier medium can be reached.
You'd think if they could do it at 7 o'clock the night before, at least a trainer might say, well, the ground was terrible today, I'll take my horse out. But there's no reason for a trainer to take their horse out the day before. You normally do it before 9 o'clock in the morning of the day of the race. So it's just never going to, the reserves are never going to get used.
OK, let's talk a little bit about Godolphin. Charlie Appleby said yesterday that notable speech. They couldn't find anything wrong with him. He's on course for the Sussex Stakes. Big race runner for them. Not Impossible Rebels Romance could go to the King George, which was really good news. But they've been conspicuous by their absence in quite a few big races of late, particularly at Royal Ascot. 2 big race winners yesterday at Newmarket. King of Conquest and Noble Dynasty both looked smart. And another big winner at Churchill Downs last night in the Wise Dan, the feature race there for Charlie Appleby and Godolphin. Their priorities are somewhat altered at the moment, Maddie. Good news about notable speech, but sort of an interesting shift in policy, and I wonder to what end.
Yes, it's hard to know, really, isn't it? Obviously, they now have that base established out in the States, and they've been targeting those races and international races now, seemingly even more clearly than before. We're often seeing horses sort of group level go out and farm those Group 1s in the States and Germany, you'll remember they sent Gayeth out to win a load of German Group 1s, and Rebels Romance is a perfect example, isn't it? They've just globe-trotted him to magnificent effect. But yeah, it's certainly more domestically, they seem to have, I mean, they had fewer runners than they'd had for quite a few years last year. That was high profile, quite a struggle for Charlie Appleby. Things obviously started better this year with Notable Speech winning. But yeah, the momentum is hard to track really at the moment.
Yeah, I suppose if there's not an imperative on you, please run them here, 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 you just go where the...
I mean, it's logical placing. That's what Charlie's doing. He's placing the horses in the most financially suitable races all around the world. You have to remember that he had the two, the two best Derby candidates sadly weren't able to turn up in the Derby. He might well have won the Derby. He's doing.
We have very short memories, don't we?
Yeah, he's doing his job to great effect. He's placing horses which he has decided to get to geld. They're not in the team's view. They're not stallion prospects. Why would you hang around here and run these horses for very little money? You know, and you know, Godolphin is a global brand. Always has been. We've got all enormously grateful for the support that it's given us individually, and still does. And I think Charlie has brought the most wonderful feel-good factor to Godolphin, you know, and it's when someone is so dominant in a sport, in any sport, it can be a natural fit for people to be resentful or you know, like the Manchester Cities, you know, things like that. And Charlie has done an amazing job because he's such a great man that everyone supports Godolphin, and I think he's just doing the logical thing by every horse. And in a different world, that when I had that terrible incident at Chester, and he might have had another Derby to his name. So I don't think it's anything to be concerned about. I think it's just logical.
Measured Time is a horse that's got a serious animal, isn't it? He could...
Yeah, I think he's probably the sad one. That I feel like he's a Frankel horse. He would have featured strongly in the Prince of Wales and probably or possibly the Eclipse as well. But Charlie, he obviously won well in America, and I think he's heading for the Breeders' Cup, so he's going to stay on that path. Maybe George doesn't want to see him, but I think it would be great if Rebels Romance ran in the King George, because although Charlie knows he can go around the world, he does actually have a chance of winning the King George, and hopefully... And it sounded like when you spoke to him yesterday that it was...
He sounded quite up for it, didn't he?
But after Hong Kong, it was not on the radar at all, I think. But it might now be back on the radar, which I think would be good for racing.
Yeah, and he said, I've been tracking the likely runners in that race. And he said, frankly, if all I've got to beat is George Scott, then we may... I'm teasing.
No. That'd be great to see him there, Rebel. I mean, he's one of my...
Say that with a straight face.
No, he's... I always talk to Charlie. He's one of my favourite horses. I mean, what an amazing horse he's been. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see how Isle of Jura stacks up against a horse like that who's been around the world and done it, because Isle of Jura will be running in those races that he's won.
And you were wondering what Aidan might throw into the King George. I'm presuming Luxembourg could be a contender. August Rodin, I'm sure, would be an obvious one. What if this horse wins today by double digits? Would he be one? Or I mean, there's going to be a good few, aren't there? Yeah,
there's sort of later maturing types of the 3-year-olds this year, aren't there, a little bit as well? Perhaps a couple of those could make inroads.
But he's not going to make your life easy, you know that, for...
I don't think anyone is. It's going to be fascinating. I mean, Augustus Rodin is obviously going to be the key horse in the race. You know, where will they go with him? I mean, they have muted America, haven't they? It would be nice to see him on the plane.
Him and Rebels.
They have talked about Ambiente Friendly going to the King George should this go well today.
You're writing our headlines for us already, aren't you?
I'm looking forward to seeing how he runs today.
All of a sudden, we've got 15 runners.
Yeah. Callum Shepherd comes late and swoops to defeat Ambiente Friendly. Ooh.
It would be nice to see them both line up in the same race.
Excellent. Your career as a diplomat is still in the mix. The Sussex Stakes. I mean, this was a nice little addendum to the Charlie Appleby interview yesterday, because he said Notable Speech was fine, goes to the Sussex. Also, Richard Brown was on the show last week. He was sort of toying with the idea of advising Wathnan to put Hartem in the Sussex Stakes, given the fact that Sharon would go to the Jacques Le Marois rather than running against Rosalien. So now you're looking at these 3-year-olds, the 1, 2, 3 in the Guineas, Notable Speech, Rosalien, Hartem, all in the Sussex. That'll take a very good older horse to give them a load of weight.
Yeah, it will. Royal Scotsman could go. He'd be interesting after he bounced back at Epsom.
They want to be running him in the July Cup, I think.
I fancy him for the July Cup. Could they not do both?
I guess you could. Why not?
Yeah, they could do both. Fantastic, isn't it? This is what we want. We want a strong 3-year-old crop, and this year it's been great to see Rosalie, and he just looks exceptional, doesn't he? Hartem is just such a lovable horse. What he did in the Jersey was very impressive, and obviously he's a previous Glorious Goodwood winner himself.
Yeah.
But what fun Richard Hannon's given this whole story over the last few weeks. You know, he's told everyone that would listen 3 or 4 times that how good Rosalian is. He's been proved right. He's allowed them to race against each other. And I think and obviously Sean Levy has been a huge part of the story. And it's just so great that Richard's already come out and said that they will run against each other and basically let the best man win. Game on. Doesn't matter if they're both in my stable. And I think that I've read a lot, obviously good friends with Richard, and it's just been a really good time for him and the way that he's gone about these 2 horses, and he's allowed all of us to look forward to the Sussex, hasn't he? Like early doors as well.
Is there a way in which Hartem ever beats Rosalian, Harry?
I'm not convinced. I'm actually not convinced it'll be easy for Charlie's horse or Hartem at Goodwood, because I just think turn of foot is so crucial there, and that's what Rosalian has.
What happens if those clouds come in over the downs and you can't see them?
Well,
you know, if it gets really soft.
What, like a here comes when year?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Jamie trying to ride Royal Scotsman, having gone 6 furlongs in the July Cup 2 weeks before.
That's the key. That's the only way that it flips, surely.
Yeah, probably the ground.
Yeah.
Very soft ground.
I was trying to persuade Richard Kingscote to persuade Sir Michael to run Nostrum in the July Cup yesterday after he didn't really see it out, but he said he wouldn't have the pace for 6 furlongs. But I don't know.
Interestingly, Paul Keeley keeps telling me that they need to run Sonny Listen in the Sussex as an older horse who would have a cracking chance.
He's not the only one.
Yeah.
He recorded a massive time form rating, didn't he?
I think they are going to go to the Sussex now. They will. I think they will.
What, with Sonny Liston?
I think so.
I suppose you've just got to give it a go, haven't you?
Yeah, why not?
I mean, you'll be running a few handicappers in Group 1s by the end of the season.
Maybe.
We'll come to that in a minute. Just hold that thought. Those were this week's talking points.